Today we'll be making a fresh pico de gallo salsa with locally grown tomatoes, and we'll show you how to make a quick and easy guacamole as the second step. And all of those steps are us on our way to making some wonderful game day nachos that are great for parties or for tailgating or for just having by yourself. They make a great snack at any time. So we're gonna get started on that pico de gallo first because we want to let that sit for a moment and let everything get happy together. We will start with our tomatoes. I'm gonna cut those into quarters. And I'm cutting out what appears to be a little divot. That's the core that I'm taking out of there. I'm gonna do that to 3 medium-sized tomatoes. Now we have all of these quarters that don't have cores. I'm going to slice those in half. And then I'm going to turn those 2 halves on their side. And then I'm going to slice those into strips. Once I get some strips, I can cut across those, and that gives me a dice. I'm going directly into the bowl with everything I'm using today. A lot of the time I'll use small prep bowls, but we don't have to do that for salsa because we can just cut it up and toss it together. And you want to repeat that for all your tomatoes. If you can, save all of the juice that comes from your tomatoes. Every once in a while you may want to lift your cutting board up and dump it into your bowl. And also, through experiments with machines that can actually taste, Heston Blumenthal has found out that the tastiest part of the tomato is actually the gel that's found around the seeds. So I don't take anything out of this recipe. We just keep it, the whole part of the tomato in, skin, seeds, and all. As soon as I get my tomatoes in the bowl, I'm going to sprinkle them with just a pinch of salt. And what this does is the salt combines with all the water in the tomatoes, or what we consider the juice, and it helps the tomatoes to give off their juice. So I'm grabbing my salt, and I'm just gonna pinch like a 3-finger pinch, and just enough on top, and that will help wick out all of the juice in the tomatoes. While that's happening, we're going to cut up our onion. This is a huge onion, even for a half of an onion. I'm gonna take out the outer part and the papery bit. The root is still on here, as you can see. We're gonna do a small dice on this. Now I'm gonna make several horizontal cuts, almost, but not quite all the way through the root end of this onion. I'm gonna make them about 3/8 of an inch apart, thereabouts, because I want a small dice on this. I'm not going very deep into the onion this time because I'm not gonna cut the whole onion. We won't need this much onion for the amount of tomatoes that we have. Now I'm gonna turn this away from me, and the root end is away from me because I'm not gonna cut through that still. And I'm gonna press my knife straight down. I'm not sawing or pushing. I'm just going straight down. Again, about 3/8 of an inch apart, so that I get tiny little strips that when we turn the onion back where it was and cut across those strips, once you cut across all of those little 3/8 inch strips you've made, you have a perfect small dice. Like I said, I'm just tossing everything in the bowl as I cut it. And this is a nice way to see if I've got the right ratio. You can kind of go by what your tastes dictate, but I'm gonna stir it together here. And that way I see, yeah, that's a beautiful amount of onion. Next will be a sweet bell pepper first. I'm gonna leave the jalapeno pepper till last, and I'll show you why. I like to do green because we have a lot of sweet and tangy things in salsa. This is the tiny bit bitter. If you want something a little sweeter, like for a mango or a pineapple salsa, you may want to use a red or a yellow or an orange pepper. This is a little bit bitter, so it's going to give us a nice contrast with everything we have in here. I'm going to take the top of the pepper off and the bottom. You can keep those pieces and you can slice those up as well. I'm slicing straight down in between two of the ribs of the pepper, and that gives me an opening. And then I can just cut each of the ribs out. And as I sort of pull on this center piece here, which contains the seed pod and all the ribs, and that I can just discard that and press that down. This gives me a nice rectangle to slice into strips again. I'm gonna cut it in half because that makes this a manageable size. I'm going to make thin slices of the green bell pepper because I want it around the same size as the onion. And cut across those strips to make your dice. I'm gonna add this half of the pepper and see what I think about that amount. Going straight into the bowl. And give it a stir to see how that is distributed in there. Maybe just a little bit more. So you can go directly by the recipe, or you can kind of eye it to your taste. You can always add. It's very difficult to take back out. All right, so we have some fresh garlic here. These are big cloves, so I'm just going to use one today. To get it out of the paper, I'm placing it on a flat side, putting my knife on top of it and hitting that with the palm of my hand or a fist, and that will pop that out of the paper. We're going to mince the garlic today. We just want teeny tiny pieces distributed throughout the salsa. So once you get the paper off, you can slice up your garlic if it's big enough. If not, you may just want to cut the little woody end off and discard that, and then do this next move. You put the tip of your knife down, put your hand flat on the spine of the knife, and lift and lower it, rocking back and forth over the garlic. A mince is about 1/8 of an inch cubed, and basically you may need to knock the garlic off your knife so it does get chopped, and move it around a couple times, just a couple times more, and you should have a wonderful mince. We're gonna put that in there. Stir that around so that everything marries together nicely. And lastly, let's see, we'll have the cilantro. Now, all you do is pluck the leaves off the stems. You can use the stems of cilantro, unlike a lot of green herbs like this. Cilantro stems taste like the leaves, but we don't want that texture in our salsa right now. But we just want the cilantro leaves today, so we're pulling them off. And we want about 2 tablespoons worth. Now, if you're one of the people who has the misfortune of tasting cilantro, and when you taste cilantro it tastes like soap, then you want to leave this step out. But if you love cilantro, add as much as you'd like to this salsa. It really is up to your taste. Very tender green leaves of herbs like this, the easiest way to kind of get them into a mince is to bunch them a little bit on top of one another, and then very gingerly, lightly roll or kind of pack them together. You don't want to crush them because you don't want to bruise them. They'll turn dark really fast. But if you can kind of bunch them up a little bit and then start to slice really tiny ribbons off the leaves. Now you have to be careful with your claw when you do that. If you have big leaves like sage or basil, then it's nice to just stack them and roll them like a burrito. So I'm going to mince it up like we did the garlic. You don't want to go over it too many times because again, you're going to bruise those leaves. So I'm going to take that. That is about 3 tablespoons worth, and we'll throw that in. That may not be enough for some people. Lastly, we're going to do the jalapeno. So for a hot chili pepper like this, the substance that makes it hot is called capsaicin, and it's in the oil that's inside this pepper. capsaicin can react with your skin and cause what is very similar to a chemical burn. So I'm going to put some gloves on before I touch this hot pepper and cut it apart and get the oil on my cutting board and my hands and everywhere. And this is why I do the jalapeno pepper last, because if I did it anywhere in between, those hot oils would still be on my cutting board. So even if I wore gloves while I cut it, if I didn't wear them the whole time, I would still possibly get that oil on my hands. I'm gonna cut the stem off, and since this is a tiny pepper, we're just gonna split it in half. Now that capsaicin is concentrated in the seeds and the ribs of the pepper. So depending on how hot you want your salsa, depends on how many of the seeds you leave in. But if we want sort of just a mild salsa, we're gonna cut out all those ribs and all those seeds and remove them. We do that just by making little slices through the ribs, and in a similar fashion to the bell pepper, removing the whole seed pod. We're gonna flatten the pepper, just like we did with the bell. And now we wanna make tiny slices, about 1/8 of an inch or so. The jalapeno, you definitely want distributed evenly. You don't want anyone getting a huge bite and all they taste is heat. You want all of these flavors to mingle together. So we'll cut across here. So this is almost a mince as it is. Mince them up with that rocking motion like we've used. And we'll do the second half exactly the same way. If you don't like heat, you can leave the jalapeno out altogether. But we'll add that in and give it a stir. I can add more salt now. And then the final piece of this is the acid that will bring it all together. And I have a lime here. I'm gonna cut this lime in half. Now, if you don't have a juicer, you may wanna roll the lime, press it and roll it. That'll break up all of those little juice cells inside the lime. But I do have a press, or if you have a reamer, that helps to get juice out. And we're gonna place this in the juicer and squeeze. And that may be enough. We'll stir all of these elements together and give it a taste and see. So we have tasting spoons right here. You want to get a little bit of everything and take a taste. I feel these are really sweet tomatoes, so I'm going to balance that out with a little, maybe not the whole lime, but a little bit more lime juice and just a touch more salt. Now that is a perfect pico de gallo right there. It is good to eat a fresh pico within about 12 hours of making it. Now remember when I told you at the beginning that we would learn a really quick and fast way to make guacamole? We're gonna do that right now. So when you're choosing your avocados at the grocery store, you just wanna press on the stem end. And if there's a little bit of give to it, then that's typically a nice ripe avocado. If it doesn't give at all, if you have a couple days, that might be one you want to use. You can just leave it outside of your fridge and it'll get softer. If it completely mushes in, it might be too ripe. So just a little bit of give as you're pressing, and this should be a good avocado. Put it on your cutting board and put your knife into it till you hit that big pit in the center, and then you just roll the avocado. This is the safest way to slice one until you meet your cut, and then twist. Oh, that's a lovely one. So, and then to get the pit out, the safest way is to use a spoon and kind of dig the pit out gently. And you can throw that away. And if it's really ripe, this is not quite mushy. This will be just perfect. So I'm going to show you how to dice the avocado. So holding it on against your cutting board, you're not cutting toward yourself, you're just going to let the tip of your knife follow the inside of the peel. But just don't put your fingers right behind, because sometimes the knife can go through the peel. So I've made strips, and then I'm gonna cut across those strips into a dice. And I'll do that with both sides of this avocado. You can use a spoon to scoop out your dice. And if your avocado is really ripe, sometimes you can even just give it a squeeze and all your dice will come out. Especially if you don't need a dice, if you're gonna smush it up anyway. So now we have our diced avocado. We'll take a fork and smush it up. You can also use an old school potato masher, the metal potato mashers. Those are really good at doing this part. And you just mash. This might be a great partner skill. So while someone is making the pico, someone else could be mashing up the avocado. Someone else could be putting the nacho ingredients together, and then everybody could have part in putting this fun party dish together. So you're just gonna smush a little bit. I like mine sort of chunky. If you want it really pureed, you may wanna do something like put it into a food processor, but you have to be careful. Avocados are very fatty, and if you over process them, they're gonna set up kind of hard. So that's about how I like it. Now, if you just wanna leave it an avocado mash like that, my advice would be to go ahead and salt it and put a little lime juice on top so that it doesn't turn brown. Kind of goes to a dark olivey brown color, and we wanna prevent that. However, we're making guac, and the easiest way to do that is take that wonderful pico that we had, take 2 or 3 spoons of that, because it's all the same ingredients that you'd put in guac, right? And then just mix that up together. And the acid in your pico will help the guac keep from turning brown. Like I said, there is a lot of fat in avocados, so taste this once you've got everything in it. The amount of salt that is perfect in a pico may need to be adjusted for a guac. Okay, so there's pico, there's guac. Now we need to come up with our nachos. For nachos, you want a sheet pan or a cookie sheet or a pizza pan. I always like to line my pans with parchment to help speed up cleanup. And we have some light restaurant style tortilla chips here, and we're just gonna scatter them on the pan. But spread them out a little bit. If you are a meat eater, this is a great way to start. This is just some roasted shredded chicken with some taco seasoning on top. You could brown ground beef. You could use anything that you kind of have hanging around if it's cooked, and you can dice it up or shred it up like we have here. Sprinkle it around. It doesn't have to be perfect because you are going to kind of bunch and stack these up when you put them on the plate. If you don't want to add any kind of animal protein, then a bean might be nice for some protein and for some different texture. I've got some black beans here, but they're a great addition to our seasoned chicken meat that we already have on here. These are just canned black beans. You could use canned or you could cook your own from dried. If you use canned, we drained and rinsed these to get some of the sodium off. There's a lot of sodium in this dish. You don't need the excess from the canning process of the beans. You could put olives or anything that you like on Southwest or Tex-Mex food. And then the final topping is some cheese. This is a Kenny Mattingly's Farmhouse cheddar. You could also use pepper jack or any kind of really good melty cheese. Would go well on nachos. And you want enough to kind of help stick all of the chips together. I believe the recipe calls for about 2 cups of shred. We'll just go ahead and put that on there. And then you just pop this into the oven. You want to get everything heated through and you want to melt all that cheese. I've got the oven on 400 degrees. Depending on how much stuff you put on top, it may take anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. I'm gonna leave it in for about 6 to 7 for this amount of food on top and for this cheese to melt. You don't want to burn your magnificent creation, so you may want to take a look at it first before your timer goes off. Okay, so our nachos have been in the oven for a few minutes. Everything's nice and hot and the cheese is all melting. So we're gonna assemble our plate for the party or for the tailgate. It's best to get everything up off the pan as soon as it comes out of the oven because the cheese will solidify when it cools. And now you can pile up your nachos like you see when you get them at a restaurant. Once everything is on top and sort of held together with the cheese, you can make a stack. If you are serving these for a long period of time, they will get less crispy as the day goes on. So you may want to either do them in batches, or you can always, if you haven't put a lot of toppings on, if you just have the meat and the cheese on your nachos, then you can pop them back in the oven and crisp up the chips again and get everything nice and warm and melty. Okay, so you have a nice big pile. You can add anything you want at this point. But since we have gone to the trouble of making all of this, we'll add some pico and some of our fresh guac and scatter that around. You might also want to put a bowl on the side. That way, if people don't get as much as they would like, when they pull off a stack, they can add more to it. And then add your guac, maybe as a garnish on top. Strategically placed on each side. Now here's where you could do something like your olives or more jalapeno slices, some pickled red onion, anything and everything that you think would go well with this dish you can do. And don't forget a little sour cream. So here is your game day nachos.